Hello, people. Hope you're well. So it's a little bit of a stormy night, so uh, you may hear some background noise. It's not too bad tonight, but there has been a little bit of a storm across the UK, so you may hear a bit of that background. Okay, this is a video which kind of encompasses a mixture of subjects I've spoken about before. But I'm kind of rolling them into one video because a number of things have come up recently, which kind of come under this umbrella subject, I guess. So I'm just going to call this the notion of appropriation in cinema, specifically cinema. So I'm not going to look, at least not in this video, in wider areas. Let's just focus on cinema for now, mostly. Because there's been a bit of it in literature as well. I mean, it's crazy to hear that writers are now getting appropriation coaches. That that to me is absurd on so many levels. But anyway, so there's been a few things that have happened recently. The actor Peter Dinklage, who is starring in the new film Cyrano, which I'm going to see. It looks like a good movie. I'm going to see that. He has apparently attacked Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs as a story and suggested it should be retired. I haven't looked in depth into that story, but apparently other dwarf actors have hit back. I think they said that he's wrong. That there is a story to be told. Um, I think one thing that has to be remembered is that when we're talking about any people, people are different. So just because one dwarf actor sees things in a certain way doesn't mean others will. And incidentally, dwarf, I don't think is a derogatory term. I've never heard that it is. Um, I think there is some. I think there's an organization in the United States called the Small People of America, and they prefer that term. But dwarfism, dwarfism, it's not a fictional thing. It's not like something from fairy tales. Dwarfs are real people. To suffer dwarfism. The way I approach these things in my own life is I would always be sensitive to what someone prefers because it is their life, right? But I also think that there's two problems in the film industry. It's become far, far too burdened down by identity politics, really, in recent years. And also, with that, it's become too sensitive. Now, of course, creators have to be intelligent. They have to consider things. By creators, I mean filmmakers, cinematographers, and so on, screenwriters. Um, but I do wonder, are we getting to the point where things are becoming so absurdly derailed and distracted by this sort of identity politics that it's taken away the entertainment value? Now, I don't agree with those who say that cinema's dead, that there's no good films being made anymore. That because they'll look at the past where this wasn't such an issue, and they'll contrast it and say cinema's dead as a result. I don't agree with that. I think there is still some very good productions out there. I've seen some very good films in recent years, so I don't think the film industry is dead as a result. But I do think it is being impacted, and not in a good way, um, because it is becoming too much of a distraction. Now, that was one thing. Another thing that's just come out apparently. I mean, this was an op-ed in some editorial, and it was one of those links you see online. But apparently now, there's such a thing as chairface. We've heard of blackface. Well, chairface apparently is able-bodied actors playing the roles of disabled people, and they shouldn't apparently. Actually, not long ago, there was yet another example. The actress and comedian Maureen Lipman was complaining about non-Jewish actors playing Jews, but other Jewish actors hit back and said she was wrong about that. Um, to me, this is just getting absurd. It seems everyone wants to jump on the bandwagon of talking about appropriation. Um, so this is how I look at it. If you really get so puritanical about this to the point where everybody has to be what they play, it would get absolutely absurd. You would get to a point where only murderers can play murderers. So if there's a film about, say, Ted Bundy or Sam Little, only Ted Bundy, who's dead, or Sam Little, who's dead, could play, their killers, or at least get other killers to do it. Now that's absurd, clearly. Um, or we could even look at any number of characters in any number of films. Take, for example, Edward Norton's character in The Painted Veil. Very good movie if you haven't seen it, based on the F. Somerset Maugham novel. But basically, he's a doctor in 1920s China, a British doctor in 1920s China. So, could only British doctors living in 1920s China play such a role? Of course not. That would be absurd. They would need a time machine. They would need to be both a doctor and an actor. And this is a key word, actor. The whole point of acting is to portray someone else. And that's something that people seem to be losing sight of. Now, I do think there's some areas where common sense needs to be involved. So I think race is one of those areas. Why? Because if you're playing a historic character, reasonably you need to look like that person. This is why when Anne Boleyn was played by a black actress, it got controversial because it looked so obviously like an attempt to force diversity. No one was criticizing her acting skill. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that Anne Boleyn was a historic person, a queen consort of England, and she wasn't black. She was described as dark. That could have referred to the fact she had a bad temper or the fact she had dark hair, but she was not a black woman. So I do think in race, there has to be a degree of realism in that sense, casting. So as a follow up to that, I do think it is right that we've moved on from blackface and yellowface. But there has to be a consistent set of standards. People who complain about blackface and yellowface can't therefore be okay with, say, a black actor or Asian actor playing a white role. Be consistent. If you're going to say that blackface and yellowface is wrong because it's mirrored in historic racism, okay, well, at least apply the same standard, even if it's not the same historic context. So, it's absurd saying, oh, well, a white actor can't play a black person. That's insulting. That belittles us as people. But don't complain if a black actor plays a white role because, oh, it's just us getting opportunities. Can't have it both ways. By you, I'm talking about woke activists who push this nonsense. Um, so I do think when it comes to historic figures, there needs to be a degree of authenticity. Background characters, it's less important. I recently watched The Electric Life of Lewis Wynne with Benedict Cumberbatch. Quite a good movie about an English artist. I didn't know much about the guy. He suffered from schizophrenia or some other mental illness. Well, there you go. Should only people who with schizophrenia play that role? Anyway, he was famous for his cat paintings, which got increasingly more outlandish, and it was quite an interesting little film. Anyway, I couldn't help but notice that there were some background characters who were black. Okay, now, this film set in the late Victorian, Edwardian periods. Okay, so we're talking the time frame is roughly 1880s to 1920s. So basically, that sort of time frame period. Now, they had one character playing Sir Henry Wood, who is famed in the Royal Albert Hall. He was a composer, and he's played by a black actor. Well, that's not realistic. So I do think that there is a very obvious drive in the film industry to kind of push diversity for diversity's sake. I believe, on the other hand, in opportunities. Give people opportunities, but don't do it just for the sake of diversity. So don't say we're going to make this character, we're going to have this character played by a black actor. So we have to, tick the boxes. Otherwise, we'll be accused of being this production too white. Now that's absurd. Likewise, last night I watched the film, what was it called? Dreamgirls. Yeah, Dreamgirls, with Beyonce, Knowles, and Jennifer Hudson, excuse me. Um, and it's loosely based on the rise of the Supremes. in the 1960s and 1970s. Now, most of the cast in that film is black. But am I, as a white viewer, offended by that? Absolutely not, because it's set in Motown, it's set in Detroit. It's about the rise of a black band, a black group, black producers, black managers. So, of course, most of the characters are going to be black. I'm okay with that. I think that's normal. That's to be expected. So a film set in Victorian England, whilst there was some diversity, it wasn't anywhere near the sort of level that we have today. I mean, London at that time, you would have had certainly Irish immigrants, Jewish immigrants fleeing the pogroms in Russia. But in terms of black and Asian people, it would have been more limited compared to today. So, you know, I think a certain historic context is important. Um, but in terms of appropriating roles, well, I mean, would it not be better to portray disabled people on screen by an able-bodied actor rather than no one at all? What if the able-bodied actor looks more like the person they're portraying if they're a historic person? You know, if it's a fictional character, maybe there's more of a case if the job to someone in a wheelchair if they're playing that. But if they look like the person, then surely that should be a factor. And also acting ability. Maybe the screenwriter or the director sees something in a certain actor they can bring to the personality of that role. Because, someone in a wheelchair is defined by much more than the wheelchair. They have a personality. They could be right wing or left wing. They could be, they could be interested in sports. They could be interested in opera music. They could be an optimistic person. They could be a pessimistic person. People are individuals. So this is what I really dislike about identity politics. This idea that someone is defined just by one thing. Um, Disabled people are not defined by their disability. So when people are saying, well, only a wheelchair-bound actor should play someone in a wheelchair, what they're really saying is that the wheelchair is the defining thing. If it's about opportunity, if that's the issue, then certainly I think disabled actors should get more opportunities. I'm all for that. I just don't agree with the premise of saying able-bodied actors can't do it. That's because I think if you go down that line, you're going to rule out a whole range of situations, and you'll end up with a situation where it's just bad casting because it's being greatly limited. And maybe the actor's not good enough or they don't look like the person. But it's been done because we better not offend people, so we better not appropriate this. I think it's very sad. The bottom line is when it comes to the film industry, this is how I see it. I believe in opportunities. And with opportunities in acting, it means actors are diverse. They play a whole range of roles. So this mantra that actors should be limited by what they look like outside of the racial issue for the reasons I mentioned. The reason I will say this, the reason why the racial aspect is a bit different than other things, such as nationality or disability or other things, is an able-bodied actor can realistically portray a disabled person because if it's not, it's a different sort of I mean, you can alter that in a way that you simply cannot alter race unless you wear paint, which of course is archaic. So that's why race is the one area that does stand out a bit differently. You cannot make a white actor black. You cannot make a black actor white, but you can have an able-bodied actor playing a disabled person convincingly. They I think they should take it seriously and they should be respectful. They can never say I know what it's like to be in a wheelchair because they don't. If they're on set for a few hours a day and then they get up again. I know when Leonardo DiCaprio played the role of a boy with severe learning difficulties in What's Eating Gilbert Grape, he showed what a great actor he was by spending time in a home for children with learning difficulties, severe learning difficulties. He spent time speaking to people, looking at their mannerisms. And he, I think anyone who's seen that film It showed what a talent DiCaprio was early on. I think he was only 18 in that film, and it just shows, that a good actor will put their homework in. Um, so basically, I do believe in opportunities. I think race is the one area, like I say, that it's hard to change, but you can have abstract. I mean, historic characters, yeah, I don't think you could change that in terms of race, but a fictional character, there's a bit more flexibility with that. Of course, a hot button topic is who's going to be the new Bond. Well, I'm okay actually with a black actor playing the role. I would say though that he should be British, um, or at least at most an American who can put on a convincing British accent. Um, but I think a black Bond is far more convincing than a female Bond. He's still a man because Bond was never written as a woman. Now, in the novels, he wasn't quite specified as a white man. I think, if we're thinking realistically, probably a white British man would be the most ideal Bond. But a black British man could pull it off, an Asian British man could pull it off, um, because the Fleming novels didn't specify he's white. So if we want to get pedantic about it. However, Bond is a man, right? So that's just the way it is. Feminists have a problem with that. Be creative. Have a female spy. You know, that's already been done. Red Sparrow. It's a good movie, good thriller. Jennifer Lawrence played a female spy. Now, if that can work, why can't you have a creative side of having a female spy rather than just pretending to be Bond? It's silly. So I just think that the film industry needs to get away with all this nonsense as much as possible. Some people might say I'm being contradictory because I'm saying, well, the racial thing, that's not believable. But I just think it's different because, like I say, unless they use makeup, which would be, it's archaic today and it isn't convincing, um, then, in other areas, I think, for example, Renee Zellweger played Bridget Jones. Now, she was so good at that role. It was only years later I found out Renee Zellweger was an American and a Texan as well. So I think basically, if I could summarize it this way, I think actors, all actors, should be allowed as much flexibility as possible to play as many roles as possible. But there, at some point, also has to be a degree of common sense. Um, you know, if someone looks nothing like the role, then it might not be convincing. Also, if you're airbrushing a historic figure, a few years ago I watched the film The Aeronauts, and it basically focused on a woman who was an aviator, early aviator, and she went up in a hot air balloon, and this was to break a certain altitude. I forget the exact science of it, but it was good film. It was watchable, and I actually knew one of the extras in it. The problem was she was meant to be portraying, or she was a stand-in for actually a man who broke this record. So this was an example of a man being airbrushed in favor of a woman portraying that role, which was a little bit controversial. I think at the very least they should have given some notes at the end or something. If you're going to base it on someone, I don't know about that one, but let me know your thoughts. I think with actors there should be absolutely as much flexibility as possible. Um, but when it comes to portraying roles, there should be a degree of believability there. Now, a good actor can pull that off, but there's some things you can't change, and I think that unless you get blackface or whiteface or yellowface, which are all archaic, they should be, then it's not convincing. The one the one of those that is acceptable is whiteface. Why? I mean, people will no doubt retort, "Oh, but white people didn't have the same historic discrimination." Okay, fair enough, but does that mean that it's okay? If you're saying it's belittling to black people to have blackface, surely it's belittling to white people to have whiteface. And why, particularly with historic characters, it just doesn't work. And I think it's kind of manipulative because, I mean, take the Black Anne Boleyn, for example. The director knew full well what she was doing. She was pushing that, and it's just this very manipulative woke way of saying, oh, well, if you criticize it, you must be a racist. No, people criticized it because it wasn't believable. That's why. It's no personal attack on the actress involved. It's just that Anne Boleyn was not black. So that's my take on appropriation, the concept of appropriation, flexibility in the film industry. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.